guys, welcome back. So I'm finally out of my reading slump, thank goodness. And in June, I actually read quite a bit, which I would say made up for the fact that I read absolutely nothing in May and barely anything in April. So without further ado, I am going to do a wrap up, which, man, I feel like I haven't done one in a while, which I suppose I haven't. So bear with me as I fumble through this. Okay, so in the month of June, I ended up reading 12 books, which is on par with how many I usually read pre-quarantine, that is. So yeah, when I say that my slump is over, my slump is definitely over. And out of those 12 books, 4 of them ended up being physical books, 3 of them were audiobooks, and then the remaining were ebooks. So thank goodness for audiobooks and ebooks, because that kind of helped transition me out of my slump. And yeah, let's just kind of go through really quickly all of the books that I read. Like I said, it's been a while, and I don't know about you guys, but June seems like it took forever. So even though I only read 12 books, I can't remember all of them. So I've got Goodreads pulled up, and we're just gonna go down the list, okay? So the first book that I read was Ceremony in Death, which is number 5 in the In Death series, and I absolutely adored this one. If you guys have been around my channel for a while, you know that I am taking part in the In Death read-along, which is this year-long readathon, basically where you read all of the books, or as many books as you want, in J.D. Robb's In Death series. As far as the overarching plot of the series, we've got a police detective named Eve, and we follow along with her as she basically investigates cases. Now, it is set in the future, but it is still grounded in our world, and what I love about this series are the side characters, and then also seeing Eve's evolution. So in this particular installment, I really enjoyed it because Eve is such a flawed character in general, and I feel like in this series her flaws come out even more. We also get a lot more Peabody, which I consider, well, she's her sidekick, or her partner rather, but because I listened to the audiobook, she sounds exactly like Velma from Scooby-Doo, so I consider her kind of like the Velma. And then of course we have her love interest, aka her husband Rourke, who is always just like it. I mean, he grounds her. He's such like that quintessential alpha male, and so with that kind of trifecta with the characterizations, I think this one was a really good installment. I ended up giving it, I believe, 4 stars, and that is because of a combination of the actual mystery and, like I said, Eve's I guess characterization, so to speak. Okay, so next book that I read was Can I Come Over by my girl Whitney G, and I'll tell you right now, I ended up giving it 5 stars. I absolutely adored this book. I feel like it was a combination of the fact that it was written really well, and then my mood just was really receptive for that type of book. And so it's a romance, obviously, but I thought that it was a really interesting plot, one that I don't usually read, but she did a really good job with it, which I was surprised about because, like I said, it's not the trope that I usually go for. So to lay it all out there, basically what it is about is a young woman who is an author. She self-publishes her books, and she ends up getting a bit of a writer's block, and so she reaches out to one of her friends that she has made online, and they kind of go back and forth, and asks them for some help with writing the scene. Well, lo and behold, things between them get pretty steamy pretty quickly, and they end up wanting to meet each other, or rather he ends up wanting to meet her, but she knows that there's an age gap between the two of them, and also she never really wanted to take it beyond the platonic level. So he ends up convincing her though to meet, and when she gets there, or rather when she meets him, she realizes, get this, it's her dad's best friend. So I'm just gonna leave it at that. Don't worry, I didn't spoil anything for you because that's basically what they tell you in the synopsis, but you have to read it if you're a fan of romance, if you're a fan of Whitney G. This one is definitely a 5 star. Okay, so the third book that I ended up reading was Meteor Baker by Ellie Alexander. I love, love, love Ellie Alexander. This is her Bake Shop mystery series, which I'm sure you guys have heard me talk about before. Somehow I never ended up reading the first installment of the series. I had to correct that. I picked it up. It got a 5 stars. Guys, this is probably one of my most favorite cozy mystery series of all time, and that is saying a lot because I've read a lot of them, but I absolutely adore this book. I think not only is it a great introduction to the series, but it's just a great series all around. So just to recap, we basically got this woman named Juliet who returns to her hometown to help her mom out with her bake shop. Up until then, Juliet has been traveling the world being like this world-renowned chef on different luxury cruise lines, and so her plan is to just stop off quickly at her mom's, help her out, and then bounce out. However, seems like life has other plans because while she's there, somebody ends up being murdered in her shop, and so naturally she feels compelled to investigate because she wants to know why this woman who was murdered was in her shop to begin with, and she wants to make sure that there's no bad publicity for the shop. So that said, this book was just so delicious in more ways than one. Naturally, because it is a bake shop or set around a bake shop, you're going to get a lot of those very yummy descriptions of like pastries and cake. But beyond that, Ellie Alexander does a fantastic job with the scenes and the location descriptions. This takes place in Ashland, which is a real life place, which I want to visit, by the way. But she really makes the place come to life through the pages. So somebody like me who's never been there, I'm able to perfectly imagine everything. And what I love in addition are all of these side characters. Now it's really unfolding to make you interested in all of the side characters. What I like about it is that she makes the characters interesting enough to where you are compelled to care about them, but they're not like too over the top as sometimes like small town quirky characters can be. They're realistic, which I really appreciate. Okay, so continuing on the Whitney G train, the next book that I read was Reasonable Doubt, which actually started off as a serial. However, by the time I read it, it was all finished, and so I read it as one complete story, which luckily I did because I can't imagine having to wait after I finished like the first or second part in the serial. But anyway, so this one was another romance, and basically it was about a young woman who forms a relationship with a guy online through a lawyer chat room. Now, originally this chat room is supposed to just help lawyers, or rather have lawyers help each other out with like questions about law or cases that they're working on. And so we have our main guy. He is the ultimate asshole alpha hero. And let me just say, side note, Whitney G just has a knack for writing asshole heroes that are just so, you want to slap them, but at the same time they have redeeming qualities that really make you cheer for them and hope that they get their happily ever after. But regardless, so this man and the woman are having this relationship online that turns from professional common courtesy to flirty and everything. And so just as he is about to ask for them to meet each other, he is in his office one day and they are interviewing interns, and one of the interns who comes in, she says something and it triggers a conversation that he had. Basically, he realizes that the intern is the person that he has been talking with online this whole time. And naturally, you know, there's a huge, not huge, but there's an age gap between the two of them. And not only is he thrown off by that, it's also the fact that he feels like she lied to him because she misrepresented herself. Anyway, so the two of them give their relationship a shot, and it's just them, oh man, they're back and forth in their relationship. There is so much tension, so much chemistry. I will say I was quite surprised that it was a little heavier than I was expecting it to be. Nowhere near like Nicholas Sparks level or anything, but it was a lot less fluff than I was anticipating, and I say that that's a good thing. So I ended up giving this one 4 stars, another solid Whitney G. So if you guys like romance and you like substance to your romance, then I would add this one to your list. So the next book that I ended up reading, well, I guess you can consider me actually listening to it, was Playing for Keeps. This one is book 1 in the Hot Jock series, which revolves around a hockey team, and in this particular installment we've got the trope of the younger sister plus the best friend's brother. Now I've only read kind of like a handful of this trope in my romance reading lifetime, but this one I say was done pretty cute. You guys know that I love hockey romances. I don't know why, but it's just my jam. And this was a really cute installment. There were some steamy scenes and a lot of humorous scenes, which I appreciate. I do love me some romantic comedies. But overall, I thought it was okay. I thought it was solid. I will say, I made a note in my Goodreads review that I do think it probably could have ended a little bit sooner. There was like a point in the story where it seemed like a conclusion, but it ended up going on at least 1 or 2 more chapters beyond that. But aside from that, if you're looking for a solid romance plot and you maybe want an audiobook to listen to, this is on Audible Escape, so check it out if you want. Okay, so this next book, it's called Daddy's Little Bride. I picked this up on Kindle Unlimited on a whim. Maybe it was a recommendation, I don't remember, but it's a novella, and I gave it a 2. And let me tell you why. It has nothing to do with the fact that it was a novella or anything, but I do think that the characters fell a little flat, and the heroine did some things that I think were a little unrealistic. So in a nutshell, I will say the premise was interesting. So basically what we have is a woman is a location scout for like Hollywood or whatever, which is interesting, right? So she's on location trying to find this perfect castle for an upcoming movie. She ends up traveling to Scotland where she finds the perfect castle, but the problem is the owner, who is like this gruff guy who recently inherited it from his family, he doesn't want her to shoot with it because he's planning on selling it and they're in debt and blah blah blah. Anyway, so she ends up spending the weekend there to try and convince him to let her film there, and so the two of them end up forming a bond. She taps into his heart, happily ever after. The thing that I had an issue with was the fact that she was willing, or rather she ended up just up and quitting her job to move to Scotland and be with him. Now don't get me wrong, I'm all about like traveling the world and doing what makes you happy. However, she never indicated in the story that she was unhappy with her job. Now, granted, you know, in the beginning we do see her boss is kind of demanding or whatever, but it's still a cool job, and location scouting is something that I feel like is a freelance thing, and so she could have easily just switched to a different boss after this particular movie was done. But yeah, I thought it was stupid that she quit her cool job to move to Scotland to be with some guy. Not only Scotland, but like the middle of nowhere, just because she thought that the place was pretty. And don't get me wrong, I've been on vacation plenty of times where I'm like, oh, this is really nice, but I wouldn't necessarily want to live there, you know? Okay, so the next book that I ended up reading was The Scot Ties the Knot, or When a Scot Ties the Knot, which is my first ever Tessa Dare, my first ever historical romance, and I absolutely adored it. I have been wanting to read historical romance for a while, and I finally got around to it, and I'm really glad that I ended up picking this one. I gave it 5 stars, and it was just an all-around good time. Now, like I said, this is my first one, so I am by no means an expert, but this had everything that I could want, not only in a historical romance, not only in a romance, but a book in general. The characters were so flawed and yet so sweet, and the plot line I think was really intriguing. And I say plotline, I go beyond just like the relationship between the hero and the heroine. There is enough backstory to support the plot line that I think really just drew me in, especially because since it's hard for me to imagine certain scenarios, especially when they're set in times that I'm not familiar with, I was a little bit hesitant. But Tessa Dare did an excellent job setting the scene, laying down the plot line, making you care about the side characters. Basically, in a nutshell, it starts off with this young girl writing a letter to this like imaginary boyfriend that she makes up just so that her parents or her family don't continue to push her to be in a relationship. And the years go by, and this lie becomes bigger and bigger, where finally one day the guy who she thinks she's been writing to, who doesn't exist, actually exists and comes to her house expecting to be married and live happily ever after. He is a Scotsman, naturally, just coming back from the war, and so the two of them end up striking up a bargain because she doesn't want to marry this guy who she doesn't actually know, and he wants to make sure that his men have somewhere safe to basically live the rest of their days out. And she's got this castle, and yeah, so it really goes back and forth between, are they actually going to go through with the marriage, or does she really want to hold out and just be a spinster for the rest of her life? And if they are going to be together, is it going to be because they have feelings for each other, or is it going to be just a business transaction? Oh my gosh, I could probably blabber on and on about this book, but honestly, I mean, if you like historical romance, I would suggest just checking it out for yourself because it's so multi-layered. I'm even just thinking about some of the side characters who are the soldiers who return back with him, and one of them has like short-term memory loss, and there's like some tragic scenes where they have to basically keep telling the guy that his whole family is dead, and it really clenches at your heart. Now, don't get me wrong, this book isn't like a tearjerker or anything, but there are a lot of emotional moments that I think make it multi-layered, which is what I was mentioning earlier. And let's just say I'm definitely a romance fan, a historical romance fan now, because if any other books are like this one, I will be checking them out in the near future. Okay, so the next book that I read was actually an audiobook, and it was part of the Donna Andrews Meg Langslow series. This one is Some Like It Hawk, which I listened to specifically because it was seasonal. It actually takes place around the 4th of July, and I mean, what else is there to say about this series that I haven't said already, other than the fact that I absolutely adore it? But I've said that before. But in this installment, like I said, it takes place around the 4th of July. They are having their annual like 4th of July kind of fair. And what's happening is that there is a guy who has locked himself in the basement of the courthouse to basically keep the lenders from buying back the building because the town is in debt. And so it's really adorable because the whole town is in on it, because naturally they don't want their courthouse to be taken by a big bank. And so Meg, who is our main heroine, as well as the rest of the town, not only have to basically help this guy stay hidden and not get his secret found out that he's in the basement, but she also has to simultaneously solve a crime, naturally, because it is a cozy mystery. I don't remember who exactly gets the axe in this one, but I think that's because I feel like the story more so focuses on the town's events and hiding the fact that this guy is living in the basement as opposed to the murder. That could just be my takeaway from it. But anyway, another solid Meg Langslow installment, so we're just gonna keep it moving. Okay, so the next two books, which if you saw my video on Monday, this will be no surprise, but I picked up the Babysitters Club. Talk about nostalgia. I'm not going to go over what each of these books is about. If you're interested in it, please check out my Babysitters Club video that's already out. But these brought back so many childhood memories, and oh gosh, even just looking at the covers just hits me with a wave of nostalgia. Needless to say, I gave them both 5 stars, not just because of the nostalgia, which again hit me hard, but because they're solid books. As I mentioned in my other video, these hold up really well, and I was pleasantly surprised to see that they withstand the test of time, not only because of the subject matter, but just the overall writing. I do think that Anne Martin, who is the author, does a really good job building these characters to make you care about them, not even if you're just, you know, a middle school girl, but if you're an adult or you're just a reader in general, you do care about the things that they're going through, which I absolutely love. And they're quick reads. I mean, I read them in one sitting each, which is to say that they were not only quick, but intriguing as well. And I've got 4 more books that came in like my bundle, and I'm probably going to read those 2 when I'm like feelings, you know, kind of down and need just an overall pick me up. Okay, so the next book that I ended up reading was Legacy of Lies by Whitney G. Oh my gosh, I just now realized doing this wrap-up video, I got 3 Whitney G's. But anyway, this one was the final installment of her Empire of Lies series, which I've talked about on previous wrap-ups. This one did not disappoint. I think I ended up giving it 4 stars. And I can't remember exactly why it's a 4-star rather than a 5-star. I think because the ending was just a little bit lackluster. I think that it was resolved a little bit too quickly, but basically what happens is our 2 main characters end up getting together, but that's not what the main conflict is. The main conflict is essentially them getting back at the antagonists in the book. I don't want to really say too much or give it away because that's the whole premise of the book, but if you're a fan of Whitney G or you're a fan of like anti-heroes, then definitely check this one out. Okay, so the last book that I ended up reading was Harper Kincaid's To Kill a Mockingbird. This is the first book in the Bookbinder series. I ended up giving it 3 stars and I really enjoyed it. You guys know that I love me some bookish cozy mysteries, or that is to say cozy mysteries that revolve around books. This one, as the title suggests, she is a bookbinder. And it's really interesting because what happens is she ends up returning back to her hometown, and she gets kind of caught up in this murder because a I guess, high school nemesis of hers, she is murdered, and all eyes point to our main character because she was the last person to see the girl. What I love about this isn't necessarily the mystery, but kind of like the side characters. So she's got this dog named Rough Barker Ginsburg, which how awesome is that? And then she has her cousin who is a nun, or rather nun in training, and both of those make for really interesting side characters who really kind of help drive the plot along, which I thought was really interesting because I've seen pets in cozy mysteries before, but not in this way. Like, they actively have a role. And then of course her cousin is hilarious, and I love that she's not like your traditional nun, which, I mean, what's a traditional nun? But nun how I would think of it, which is kind of like prim and buttoned up. Her cousin is not like that at all. In fact, she's still kind of like getting her bearings, and at one point she's deciding if she really wants to be a nun or not. So that was kind of an interesting little subplot to follow along with. But overall, I would definitely say that this is a strong start to the series. I am interested in following along to see what kind of shenanigans our main character can get into. One thing that I do want to point out, which I thought was really interesting, was that the romance elements in this book really stood out to me. I am used to cozy mysteries that of course have maybe like our main character having a will they won't they with you know, another character in the book, be it like the town sheriff or, you know, an old high school flame or whatever. But this one I feel had a stronger romance presence, which I was a little bit surprised about. Not like it was a bad thing or anything, but just something that I noticed. And I think maybe it's because the author has a background in writing romance. I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but regardless, it was definitely something that I think is interesting. At the very least, it's making me interested to see kind of like how that relationship evolves in the next books in this series. If it's going to for sure be a thing, or if it's going to kind of go into that will they won't they, like I said, a lot of cozy mysteries do. But anyway, overall a solid start, and if you like bookish cozy mysteries, then definitely give this one a shot. Okay, so I guess that'll wrap it up for my wrap up. I hope you guys enjoyed maybe seeing the books that I ended up reading this month. I know for one, I am super relieved to know that I am over my reading slump, though I feel like I should probably like lay low on saying that because I don't want to jinx anything, knock on some kind of wood. But did you read any of these? If so, as usual, please let me know in the comments. But even if you didn't read any of these, let me know maybe what your favorite book is that you read in June. I can always add it to my July TBR. I don't know, but anyway, thank you guys for watching. Please like and subscribe if you like this video or you want to see more content like it, and happy reading. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye!